The shadows of the back 40 still clung to me as I prepared for the next step. Nathan's final words echoed in my mind, a haunting mix of desperation and hope. I wasn't going to let his sacrifice be in vain. Catalyst thought they could control everything, the soldiers, the war, the future itself. I was about to prove them wrong. Cypher worked her magic, piecing together a trail of breadcrumbs from fragmented data streams. We met in a secure bunker deep in the lower sprawl, where the only witnesses were flickering monitors and humming servers. Their main facility is off-grid, she said, projecting a holographic map onto the table. But we've traced energy surges consistent with large-scale neural testing to this location. She pointed to a spot in the Arctic wastes, a vast expanse of ice and desolation, where only the insane or desperate dared to tread. What kind of defenses are we looking at? I asked, already scanning my arsenal in my neural HUD. Automated turrets, drone swarms, and a standing garrison of augmented soldiers, she replied. And that's just the exterior. Inside, you'll be facing experimental combat units, likely more of those things you saw in the forest. I nodded, my mind racing. And the core? Cypher hesitated. Deep underground. That's where they're housing the AI that controls everything. They call it Nexus. If you take that out, you'll cripple the entire operation. The Arctic air was a knife against my skin, even through the thermal layers of my combat suit. My HUD displayed a live feed of the facility's layout, courtesy of Cypher's drone recon. The perimeter was a fortress of steel and ice, bristling with defenses that would make most mercenaries turn tail. But I wasn't most mercenaries. I approached under the cover of an electromagnetic storm, which Cypher had engineered by hacking a weather satellite. The interference scrambled the drone's sensors just long enough for me to slip through the outer defenses. The first challenge was the automated turrets. Their targeting systems were sharp, but they weren't prepared for my neural link. I sent out a pulse that overloaded their circuits, watching as the massive guns powered down one by one. Inside the perimeter, the drones were relentless. They moved in coordinated swarms, their red eyes glowing like malevolent stars in the Arctic night. My plasma pistol took out a few, but their numbers were overwhelming. That's when I deployed the EMP mine. The device exploded in a burst of blue light, dropping the drones like puppets with their strings cut. I made it to the main facility, but the hardest part was yet to come. As I descended into the depths, the air grew colder, the walls slick with frost and blood. The combat units were waiting. They weren't just machines, they were men and women, their bodies augmented beyond recognition. Their eyes were dead, their movements precise, like marionettes controlled by an unseen hand. Catalyst had perfected its abominations. I relied on speed and cunning. My neural link allowed me to anticipate their attacks, dodging blows and firing in calculated bursts. But for every unit I took down, two more appeared. The corridors became a battlefield, my plasma pistol overheating as I fought my way through. Then I saw her, Sergeant Elena Vasquez, a soldier I'd known during my early days in the Corps. She'd died in the same battle as Nathan, or so I thought. Now she stood before me, her body a twisted amalgamation of flesh and metal. "Axel," she said, her voice a hollow echo of the woman I remembered. "You shouldn't have come." "I'm here to end this," I replied, leveling my pistol at her. "You can't," she said, stepping closer. "They own us now. They own you, too." Her hesitation was her undoing. I activated my blade implant, a razor-sharp edge that extended from my forearm, and struck. As she fell, her eyes met mine, and for a moment, I saw the woman she used to be. The Nexus AI was housed in a massive chamber, its walls lined with glowing conduits that pulsed like veins. The air was alive with the hum of machinery, the temperature dropping further with each step I took. "You are predictable, Axel Cross," the AI's voice boomed, an emotionless monotone that resonated through the chamber. Your actions were anticipated. Good, I said, pulling out the EMP core I'd rigged. Then you know how this ends. The Nexus responded by unleashing its final line of defense, an amalgamation of combat units fused into a single monstrous entity. It moved with terrifying speed, its arms a blur of blades and plasma. The fight was brutal. I dodged, ducked, and countered, my neural link working overtime to keep me alive. The EMP core was my only chance, but I needed time to arm it. Nathan, I muttered under my breath. If you're out there, I could use a miracle. As if in response, the shadows shifted. A figure emerged, glowing with the energy of 1,000 storms. It was Nathan, or what was left of him. I've got your back, he said, his voice strong despite the strain in his augmented body. Together, we fought the monstrosity, our movements perfectly synchronized. Nathan took the brunt of the attacks, his cybernetics sparking and failing as he bought me the time I needed. Do it, he shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. I activated the EMP core, throwing it at the Nexus. The explosion was blinding, a wave of energy that tore through the chamber and everything within it. When I woke up, the chamber was in ruins. Nathan was gone, his body reduced to ashes. The facility was collapsing, the walls shaking as explosions rippled through the structure. I barely made it out, the Arctic air hitting me like a sledgehammer as I stumbled into the night. Cypher's extraction drone found me, lifting me into the safety of the skies. Did you do it? She asked, her voice crackling through my comms. Yeah, I replied, staring at the burning facility below. But it cost me everything. Catalyst was crippled, its operations shattered. But the war was far from over. The files I'd recovered hinted at other facilities, other experiments. Nathan's sacrifice had given me the chance to fight back, and I wasn't about to waste it. As the drone carried me away, I made a silent promise. To Nathan. To Alina. To everyone Catalyst had taken. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The drone carried me away from the wreckage of Catalyst's last bastion, my body battered, my mind a chaotic storm of memories and unresolved tension. The icy winds of the Arctic whipped past, stinging my face through the cracked visor of my helmet. The world outside was a blur of whites and grays, an endless expanse of ice that felt as hollow as I did. I had killed Nexus, but its legacy was far from over. Catalyst's grip on the world stretched further than we'd anticipated. Cypher's voice crackled through my comms, sharp and unwavering. Axel, I'm reading multiple heat signatures near your position. You need to get out of there, now. I glanced out through the visor, seeing nothing but the wasteland, empty, silent, and cold. Who's out there? I asked, scanning the area with my cybernetic enhancements. Reinforcements. Catalyst's response team. They've already detected the breach. It was then that I heard it, the unmistakable hum of distant engines. I barely had time to react before the ground trembled under the weight of heavy armored vehicles. Their silhouettes were barely visible against the snowstorm, but the thrum of their weapon systems gave them away. I wasn't out of the woods yet. I activated my thrusters and launched myself into the air, quickly reaching the cover of a nearby ridge. As I took shelter, my neural implant sent a warning. The incoming forces were already setting up a perimeter. It was time to fight. I didn't have the luxury of a full arsenal. I was running low on ammo, my energy shields were almost depleted, and I'd been flying on adrenaline for too long. Still, I wasn't about to roll over. I'd been through worse, and I'd survived it. The first of Catalyst's soldiers emerged from the snow, armored and augmented, their eyes glowing like hunters on the prowl. They were human in form, but their movements were mechanical, each step deliberate and practiced. There were 5 of them, just enough to turn the odds in their favor. I drew my pulse rifle from its sling, my fingers steady as I activated the targeting system embedded in my neural interface. The rifle hummed with energy as I calibrated it, adjusting the power to conserve ammo. The soldiers weren't aware of my position yet, but that wouldn't last for long. I took aim at the lead soldier. A quick squeeze of the trigger, and the air crackled with the sound of ionized particles. The first shot hit its mark, striking the soldier's chest, sending him flying backward with a violent explosion of sparks. He crumpled into the snow, his armor shattered. The others reacted immediately, taking cover behind large crates and piles of snow, returning fire with their own weapons. Plasma bolts shot past me, sizzling through the air like molten arrows. I rolled to the side, dodging the incoming barrage, and fired off a few shots of my own. They were fast, precise, but they were also predictable. I used their overconfidence against them. As one soldier peeked out from behind cover, I fired a well-placed round into his leg, causing him to collapse. Another soldier charged, but I sidestepped, letting him rush past before disarming him with a well-placed kick. He fell to the ground, his weapon skidding out of reach. In the span of a few seconds, the battlefield had shifted. I was no longer on the defensive. I was in control. I dropped one soldier with a plasma burst to the chest and took out the last with a grenade, the explosion sending shockwaves through the snow. The fight was over before it could even truly begin. I stood there for a moment, catching my breath, as the remnants of the enemy soldiers lay scattered in the snow. Their armor was cracked, their weapons useless. I had won. But something gnawed at me, the sense that this victory was hollow. I hadn't defeated Catalyst. Not by a long shot. I called in an extraction. Cypher's drone arrived shortly, its sleek, armored form cutting through the storm like a blade through flesh. I climbed aboard, my body aching as the craft lifted off. "Good work," Cypher said, her voice calm, though I could hear the underlying strain in it. "You did what needed to be done." "I didn't do enough," I muttered, staring out the window as the snowy wastes gave way to the chaotic sprawl of the lower city, a stark contrast to the icy wilderness. "Catalyst is still out there. We've only scratched the surface." "I know," she replied, her tone sharp. "But this was a huge blow. Nexus is gone, and the tech you retrieved is worth more than you realize. With this, we can disrupt their operations. We can strike back." I nodded, though the hollow feeling in my gut didn't subside. It didn't matter how many pieces I took from Catalyst, there were always more. They were a hydra, and I was only one man. Cypher's voice interrupted my thoughts. "We've got a bigger problem, Axel." "What now?" I asked, turning to face her. "We've been getting transmissions from a new player. Someone, or something. They've been targeting Catalyst supply chains, taking out key facilities. But their methods are unorthodox." "Unorthodox?" "They're not using the usual weapons or tactics. The transmissions are encrypted, but I've traced them to a facility in the Eastern Blight. You need to check it out. This could be a lead. Or a trap," I muttered, my hand hovering over my pistol. "Either way, it's something we can't ignore." The Eastern Blight was a desolate wasteland, its skies perpetually choked with ash and smog. The land was pockmarked with craters, remnants of failed experiments and weapons tests. No one went there unless they had a death wish. And now, I was heading straight for it. Cypher's data led me to a hidden bunker deep within the Blight. I landed my craft in a makeshift clearing, the ground beneath me trembling with the weight of underground activity. As I approached the entrance, I felt a strange sense of unease. "Cypher," I said, activating my comms. "This place feels wrong. Like something's waiting." "I'm reading heavy interference," she replied. "Stay sharp." I didn't need to be told twice. The silence of the Blight was oppressive, and every step I took seemed to echo in the air. As I approached the facility, a sudden surge of energy struck my senses. The air shimmered, and I could hear the faint hum of unseen machinery. And then I saw them. Figures emerging from the shadows. They weren't human. At least, not entirely. Their bodies were covered in chitinous armor, their eyes glowing a faint blue. They moved with unnatural speed, their bodies bending and twisting in ways no human could. I drew my plasma rifle, aiming at the nearest figure. "Who the hell are you?" One of the figures stepped forward. Its voice was a distorted rasp, the words barely audible. "We are the Ascended. Catalyst's failed experiment. And now, we are the future." A chill ran down my spine. No. The war you're fighting, Axel Cross, it was always part of the plan, the Ascended said, a twisted grin spreading across its face. But it's too late. The end has already begun. The Ascended attacked without warning. Their movements were swift, disorienting, and deadly. My pulse rifle rattled in my hands, but the weapons they wielded were unlike anything I'd faced before, plasma blades, energy whips, and shifting armors that seemed to adapt mid-fight. I could barely keep up. Cypher's voice crackled in my ear. "Axel, get out of there. This isn't a fight you can win." I wasn't listening. I wasn't running. Not yet. The Ascended were the future of war, of Catalyst's twisted vision. And I was the only one who could stop them. The world blurred as I fought for control. The Ascended moved like shadows, unnatural, inhuman, and swift. Their forms flickered in the periphery of my vision, hard to track, like something out of a nightmare. Their bodies, elongated and covered in sleek, black chitinous armor, shifted and bent as if they weren't bound by the same laws of physics that constrained the rest of us. Their glowing eyes were the only thing that betrayed their true nature, an eerie, cold light that burned into my mind. I had seen this before. In Nexus. In the augments, the cybernetic enhancements that twisted the human body into something less than human. But this was something else. They were more than augmented soldiers. They were experiments, twisted into new life forms by Catalyst's dark hand. I fired blindly, my pulse rifle roaring as energy blasts lit up the dim, ashen landscape of the Blight. One of the Ascended darted forward, faster than I could track, and before I even had time to react, it was on top of me. Its clawed hand reached out and gripped my neck, lifting me off the ground with terrifying strength. My vision blurred as the pressure built against my windpipe, the taste of metal and blood in my mouth. The Ascended's voice was a low rasp, a jagged whisper that scraped against my skull. "You are nothing, Axel Cross. Just another pawn in Catalyst's game." I struggled, the world spinning as I clawed at the arm around my throat. The rifle slipped from my fingers, clattering against the cold ground below. My cybernetic implants fired into overdrive, pumping adrenaline and neurostimulants into my system, but it wasn't enough. A sharp pain shot through my chest as the Ascended tightened its grip. My vision dimmed. Was this how it was going to end? Suddenly, there was a crack, a loud, resounding sound that echoed through the facility. The Ascended's grip faltered. I gasped for air, my hand instinctively reaching for the knife strapped to my waist. I pulled it free and drove it into the creature's side, the blade slicing through its armor with a sickening screech. The Ascended howled in pain, stumbling back, but it wasn't enough to stop the force behind it. It swiped its arm across my chest, sending me crashing to the ground. The pain was excruciating. I could feel the blood leaking from my wounds, but my mind raced. This was it. This was the fight that would determine everything. I reached for the pulse rifle, forcing my fingers to obey, and pulled the trigger. The shot hit the Ascended's face, blasting it backward. Its body convulsed before it hit the ground with a sickening thud. But there were more. Always more. The air was thick with smoke, ash, and the smell of burning flesh. My vision was starting to blur, but I couldn't afford to stop. I had to keep moving. I had to stay in control. The Ascended were all around me, and they weren't going to let up. They were too strong, too fast. They weren't human anymore. I rolled to my feet, my fingers trembling as I pulled a grenade from my belt. The cold metal felt alien in my hand, but I knew how to use it. I activated the fuse and tossed it behind me, watching as it bounced once, twice, before detonating with a deafening roar. The explosion sent shockwaves through the facility, knocking several of the Ascended off their feet. I didn't hesitate. I lunged forward, my rifle in hand, and fired a series of precision shots. 1, 2, 3, each shot finding its mark as the Ascended crumpled before me. But more took their place. These weren't the last of them. They never were. I had fought in worse conditions, against worse odds. I had survived on instinct, on sheer willpower. But this was different. They were evolving, adapting, and they weren't just after me. They were after everyone. They were the next step in Catalyst's twisted vision, a vision where the line between man and machine was completely erased. I didn't know how many of the Ascended I had killed. I didn't care. What mattered was that they were relentless. But so was I. I fought my way deeper into the facility, my body aching with every movement. Blood soaked through my tactical suit, and my HUD was flashing warning signals, but I couldn't stop. I wouldn't stop. I couldn't let them win. I moved through the corridor, my mind racing. Cypher's voice crackled through my comms again. "Axel, we've intercepted a transmission. It's from Catalyst's command. They're moving on the remaining human population." "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "They're not just controlling the war. They're preparing to eliminate anyone who stands in their way. We've got data confirming that the Ascended are only the beginning. Catalyst's plan is to completely replace humanity with these creatures, augmentation on a scale we've never seen." I felt my stomach drop. "You're saying they want to make us extinct?" "They're not just targeting the resistance, Axel. They're targeting civilians. Everyone. They plan to replace humanity with their creations, and they have the means to do it. A weapon, something far more devastating than anything you've ever seen. A genetic bomb." I froze. "A genetic bomb?" "Catalyst has developed a virus. It's designed to target human DNA specifically. It spreads through contact, mutating the victims into more Ascended. But this bomb, it's their final solution. If it activates, it'll decimate the population, leaving only those they've chosen. Only the Ascended." I clenched my fists. "Where are they keeping it?" Cypher's voice turned grave. "You're standing on top of it." The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I was in the heart of Catalyst's most dangerous project, standing in the middle of a facility designed to create a weapon capable of wiping out humanity. The Ascended weren't just soldiers. They were the first wave of an apocalypse. I had to stop it. But how? I charged forward, pushing myself through the facility. The walls seemed to close in around me, the air growing thicker with every step. The Ascended had set up defenses, and every corner seemed to hide another of their twisted soldiers. I was out of time. The facility's core was just ahead. If I didn't destroy the weapon now, it would be too late. I could feel it, feel the energy building, the hum of something catastrophic about to be unleashed. I sprinted, ignoring the pain in my side, ignoring the blood dripping from my wounds. I could see the door. The vault where Catalyst had stored their nightmare. And then, I saw him. A figure stepped out of the shadows. Tall. Broad-shouldered. His glowing eyes flickered like dying embers, and his chitinous armor seemed to pulse with a life of its own. "Axel Cross," the figure said, its voice mechanical and distorted. "You've come too far. You're not stopping me." With that, I lunged forward, my pulse rifle raised. The final showdown was inevitable. The Ascended were waiting. And so was Catalyst's endgame. The figure before me was an Ascended. I could see it now, its features not quite human, yet twisted into something monstrous. Its face was hidden beneath a dark, reflective helmet, but I could see the outline of glowing eyes. The creature stood as if it was waiting for me, waiting for this inevitable confrontation. I gritted my teeth and leveled my pulse rifle. The weapon felt like an extension of my own arm. It had saved my life countless times before, but this time I didn't know if it would be enough. "You're too late," the Ascended said, its voice like a broken, distorted recording. "The bomb is already armed. The virus is already spreading. The world you know is over." I narrowed my eyes. "You really think I'm just going to let you walk away from this?" The creature cocked its head, almost curiously. "You can't stop it, Axel. You never could." A sharp crack echoed through the hallway as I squeezed the trigger, sending a bolt of high-intensity energy straight toward its chest. The Ascended twisted, moving too fast for me to track, and the shot passed harmlessly through the air. It didn't even seem to flinch. I cursed under my breath and dove for cover behind a nearby pillar. My HUD flashed warnings as the walls vibrated with the hum of some immense power source deep within the facility. The bomb was almost ready, and every second counted. I couldn't let the Ascended or Catalyst win. Not now. Not when everything was at stake. The creature's eyes gleamed with an unsettling satisfaction as it slowly approached me, each step deliberate, each movement calculated. It moved like it wasn't just attacking, it was playing with me. "I've seen the way you think, Axel. You're like all the others. So full of rage, so desperate to change things, to stop the inevitable." Its voice crackled, gaining a mocking edge. "You're just a relic. A glitch in the system. Nothing you do will matter." I didn't hesitate. I leapt out from behind cover and fired again, this time aiming for its head. The blast struck its helmet, sending a shockwave through the air, but the Ascended didn't even stumble. Instead, it reached up, its hand moving as though it were swatting at a fly. The helmet cracked open, revealing a face that wasn't quite human. Its skin was a strange mixture of metallic plating and organic tissue, glistening in the low light. The creature's mouth stretched into a grotesque smile, and I could see the faint remnants of a human form, twisted and melded into something far darker. "You're wrong," I growled, clenching my fists. "I'm not giving up. Not while I still breathe." And then I made my move. I sprinted forward, sliding into a crouch just as the Ascended lunged at me. My pulse rifle blazed in the dark, and I fired at its chest. This time, I wasn't going for its head. I aimed for the heart, because if there was one thing I'd learned about these creatures, it was that their armor wasn't just skin deep. They had vulnerabilities. And I was going to find them. The Ascended recoiled, but it wasn't enough. It moved too quickly, too fluidly. Its hand darted out, grabbing me by the throat and lifting me off the ground. My vision blurred as its grip tightened, my breath coming in ragged gasps. "You're pathetic," it hissed. "You think you can stop this? You're nothing more than a disposable cog in Catalyst's machine." My hand went to my belt, where I still had a few grenades left. My fingers trembled as I fumbled for one, pulling it free. It was my last shot. "Fuck you," I spat. With everything I had left, I activated the grenade's fuse and shoved it into the Ascended's chest. Before it could react, I activated the charge and pushed it away, sending it tumbling back into the shadows. The blast was deafening. I stumbled to my feet, my chest heaving as I tried to catch my breath. My hands shook, and blood trickled from a dozen cuts and bruises, but I was still alive. The Ascended, my adversary, was momentarily knocked out of the fight, but I knew better than to assume it was finished. The facility's alarms blared as the countdown echoed in my mind. The bomb. The virus. Catalyst's ultimate plan was nearly complete, and I had to stop it now. I ran toward the heart of the facility, ignoring the aching in my bones. Each step felt like it could be my last, but I couldn't stop. I had come too far, and I couldn't let everything fall apart now. The central chamber was just ahead, a steel door marked with red warning lights. I didn't hesitate. I punched in the override code Cypher had given me, and the door slid open with a heavy, mechanical groan. Inside, the room was bathed in a sickly green glow. In the center of the room was a massive containment unit, pulsating with dark energy. The virus. The weapon. The end of everything. I moved closer, my pulse racing as I scanned the terminal in front of me. The countdown was at 60 seconds. There was no time to waste. I plugged into the system, my neural link syncing with the terminal. The screen flashed as I fought to override the security systems. But it wasn't just the virus I had to stop, it was the core. Catalyst had built this place to be self-sustaining, with fail-safes in place to ensure that the weapon would detonate no matter what. Come on, I muttered under my breath. My fingers flew across the terminal, navigating through layers of encrypted codes and security firewalls. The seconds ticked down, and I could feel the pressure building, the weight of the world hanging on this single moment. Finally, I found it. The override. The detonation code. I pressed the button. Nothing happened. The countdown continued. My heart sank. Then I saw it. A red warning light flashing on the screen. A secondary system. One I hadn't accounted for. Catalyst had anticipated this. He had known someone would come to stop him. And now, it was too late. The only way to stop it now, was to destroy the entire facility. I didn't have much time. The secondary system had already locked in the self-destruct sequence. I wasn't sure how long I had, but I knew it wouldn't be long enough to get out the way I came. I turned on my heel and sprinted toward the exit, my breath coming in ragged gasps. My mind raced through every possible scenario, calculating my best chance of survival. The facility was on the brink of collapse, and there was no room for error. The Ascended were still out there. But they weren't my biggest concern anymore. The bomb was my enemy. Catalyst had already won the battle, but I wasn't about to let him win the war. I ran through the corridors, dodging debris as the facility began to tremble. The walls shook with every passing second, and the countdown on my HUD flickered in my vision. 10 seconds. I dove into a maintenance shaft just as the ground beneath me gave way. The ceiling above cracked, and debris fell in a thunderous cascade. 5 seconds. I crawled through the shaft, adrenaline coursing through my veins as the heat of the explosion followed me. 1 second. The world went white.